So, you'll never guess where I am. I'm actually not in my backyard. I'm at our backyard, the back of the 910 Center. And this is where the beginning of our nature trail starts. I don't know if you've ever looked up here, but we have a giant sequoia here. And the reason why I'm here is not really to talk about trees, but what trees and many other kinds of things are made of, right? So I don't know if you've ever been back here, but there's certainly a lot of trees, all right? And trees are made out of wood, right? Trees are living things. And so I'm really not here to talk with you today about trees as I am to talk about carbon. That's right. Everything that you see around me has abundant amounts of carbon. All right. Now, what about carbon? I made this big deal, when we were out in the woods, and so let's focus on what carbon really is all about. Now, when we talk about carbon being the foundation of life, another way of looking at it is that when we look at the molecules that involve living things, it really forms a backbone of many of the very important molecules that we see in living things. Now, when I was your age, when I was much younger, we had the original Star Trek on TV, and they had written into their story the idea that somehow life could be based upon another element, silicon, as the backbone of the molecules of life. As it turns out, silicon would never really work because it's not chemically active enough. Carbon is ideal, and let me show you why. Here is a diagram of a carbon atom, and as you can see in the nucleus, we have protons. I don't know how to spell protons, do I? Protons. And in this case, we have 6 of them. We also have 6 neutrons, which are most commonly found in a carbon atom. They can vary, however, but it's really the 6 protons that give the character, chemical and physical properties that carbon has. Because these 6 protons are going to be what attracts these electrons. And you can see there are 2 in the first energy level, and there's 4 electrons. This is important, 4 electrons in the outer energy level. You can see them here. And you normally need 8 electrons to fill the valence energy level there, okay? And that's going to make it stable. And so because carbon has only 4 electrons there, it's really only halfway filled. Now, the dilemma that carbon has is it can't steal 4 more electrons, even part-time, to fill that up. It just doesn't happen very often, nor would it be willing to give away these 4 electrons and become positively charged. So it's very hard then to get a carbon atom that forms an ion or a charged particle. And so typically we're going to see covalent bonding. Covalent bond, says it right up here. I'm going to pause the video and jot this down. Carbon typically is going to form covalent bonds that share electrons between this carbon atom and many, many other kinds of elements, including other carbon atoms. And so this is going to result in some unique properties because of that. Carbon atoms now are kind of like the Legos of the periodic table of all the different elements. They will connect with many, many different things, forming these covalent bonds. They can form chains from one carbon atom to the next, just like you would, push pop beads together, like when you're a child. They can also form branched chains. I'll show you one in a moment, because one carbon atom can bind to a chain of other carbon atoms in one direction or another, because there's 4 electrons that are possible there, 4 different branches that could branch off of one carbon atom. Think about it. And then you could also form rings. And so we have really an unlimited kind of molecules that you can form from carbon atoms. just like Legos. And so here's some examples that you can see. Here would be a chain called pentene. Remember, pentagon is 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons in a chain. And we can see 4 and then 1 more. And this is an unusual thing referred to as a double bond. So 2 of those electrons on this carbon atom are going to be shared with 2 carbon atoms on this carbon atom, and it's got 2 more that it can form out here. As a rule, carbon atoms are going to form 4 covalent bonds. So you can look for them on every one of these. Every carbon atom here in this chain, you're seeing 4 bonds appear around it. Same thing over here. We don't write the bonds out where the hydrogens are in this case, but you can see there's 3 hydrogens. So there's going to be 3 other bonds coming off of this carbon atom here, and then the 4th, attaches to this chain here off of the main chain. And again, the same thing for rings that we see here. We're going to see 2 bonds here on this ring for vanillin, which is the flavor for vanilla. It's the molecule that does that. A 3rd bond here over to this carbon atom, and then the 4th is going to be taken up by this hydrogen atom right here. So 4 bonds always for a carbon atom. We'll be making models of these. Subunits form carbon molecules, and you can take these subunits and build them just like Legos. Okay? Do you remember what the prefix mono means? Yeah, that's going to mean 1. You want to write that down. All right? So you can have these smaller particles, and they can just be repeated over and over and over again. And we see that in carbohydrates. We see that in many other kinds of molecules. These subunits can be repeated over and over again. Now, when we take many monomers, we can link them together like Legos, like pop beads. And keep in mind the prefix poly means many. Monomers come together as subunits to form very large molecules, very large atomic masses of sometimes even hundreds, maybe even thousands of atoms that are bonded together by these subunits coming together. And so here would be a graphic that would help you to recall that. Here we have 6 sugar molecules bonded together. These rings here represent a sugar molecule into a long chain. So we have the smaller subunit, mono, coming together to make the many, a polymer. First, want to look at carbohydrates. You can have very simple carbohydrates that are monomers, as I showed you a moment ago. You can also have very large carbohydrates, but what they all have in common is they're made up of carbon, see carbo, and hydrate. I want you to think of water, because what are the other 2 elements that are here? Hydrogen and oxygen, and they form in that ratio. Carbons with water, okay? That's what makes a carbohydrate. So whenever you look at any structure or chemical formula that has these 3 elements combined, among the simplest of carbohydrates is this molecule glucose that you see here. Again, you see a hexagon-shaped molecule, and oxygen is on one of these. If you count these all up, you'll see that you'll have 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. So as a rule, just like we said, we have 1 carbon to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen. And you can see the larger the molecules grow, they typically are going to stay at about this proportion. Glucose is a very important molecule because when carbohydrates are broken down and they travel through your bloodstream, they're nearly always converted to this molecule called glucose by the digestive system. 2 very common molecules that are used that we see in our food are the glucose that I mentioned before and fructose. Again, carbohydrates are going to include sugars. They're also going to, and these are very simple, smaller molecules, quick energy. We also find them in much more larger molecules that are starches. I'll show you those in a minute. When we refer to these simple sugars, we refer to them as monosaccharides. The word saccharide over from the Latin means sugar. You can also have polysaccharides, like we saw a moment ago, starches, all kinds of paper. And what is paper made from? Well, that came from wood, right? Okay, so all wood is actually made of cellulose. And if you're taking notes in a notebook right now, that paper, which came from a tree, is also a carbohydrate, a polysaccharide called cellulose. In mammals, we store energy in nearly all cells in the form of another polysaccharide known as glycogen. Your liver stores that, as well as there are stores of this molecule that are going to be in your muscle cells throughout your body as well. The monosaccharides, keep in mind, like glucose, they're used up rapidly in the bloodstream. The polysaccharides, such as glycogen, they're going to be for a longer term storage form of carbohydrate. But again, the idea here is carbohydrates are used for energy. Keep that in mind. All right. So the carbohydrates that make up this cake and the confectioner's sugar that's being sprinkled down here, we have a great example here of the monosaccharides, and the flour that was used to make this cake. Those are going to be the polys. Okay, larger molecules, these small ones being linked together, many being linked together. And so that's how carbohydrates come to us. Now, as I said, they're broken down to form energy. In plants, they're largely used as part of the cell structure, okay? Particularly the cell wall that goes around all the plant cells. And of course, that's how we get wood, okay? Now, the typical forms that we see this in, when you look at starchy foods such as potatoes, and even corn, like field corn, like the animals eat, these polymer kind of molecules are due to branched structures. All right. The other major category that you're going to see, as I mentioned a moment ago, would be in grass and all other plants, wood and so forth. And that's going to be cellulose. And these are typically straight and rigid structures that are there. If you look at a blade of grass, for example. Now, you may be thinking, well, all this is pretty good. Okay, I know I can eat a potato, or I can eat bread, and we get starches from those, but I don't eat wood. Yeah, me neither. And you don't eat paper. Well, maybe little kids do, but we don't eat this. And the reason why is because there are enzymes that we as human beings lack in our digestive system. We can't break cellulose down, so you can't eat paper and digest it. However, a goat could, because they have a particular enzyme that allows them to eat grass and eat paper and break that down. And deer out in the field, when they're eating those plants that we refer to as forbs for energy, to them, it's like eating ice cream, because they have the enzymes that will break that down and turn it into sugar. And so they love eating, those green leafy plants that you and I would both consider weeds. And yet for them, as I said, it's ice cream because it breaks down into sugar. They have the enzymes in their digestive system to do that. So they love it. All right, well, that'll just give you something of an introduction about the different kinds of carbon compounds that we find in living things. This is Mr. Zietz reporting from the 910 Nature Trail. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.